I'm gonna get this whole thing taken out of here now, and then we will take it over to the bench. We'll work on it there. All right, guys. So what I'm gonna be using today to do all this, I'll put a link in the description below. That way you guys can check it out. But I'm gonna be using Deutsch connectors. They're a OEM style connector, all waterproof and stuff. They work really well. They're super easy to do and to pin once you have the tools to do it. And the tools to do it are not super expensive. You should be able to buy a kit with like everything you need, you know, a whole bunch of different connectors and stuff like that, and the, you know, crimps and stuff for a couple $100. So just as much money as you'd normally spend on, you know, the cheap style connectors and stuff like that. You know, you can do a proper automotive style. Also going to be using some heat shrink with adhesive. I also have a whole bunch of rolls of it as well that are, you know, long. Probably not going to be using a lot of that for this, because when you use heat shrink that has adhesive in it, right, and you heat shrink a section of wire on the bench, you do it, you know, in a straight line, right? Well, once that adhesive dries, it basically stays like a stick. So it makes bending it through the car super challenging. You could use the high temp, you know, fabric style of tape like they do for OEM stuff. Kind of like they use that stuff in engine bays a lot and everything else. But where this is going to be, it doesn't have to be high temp. So for that, I'm going to be using this expandable sleeving. Basically, it kind of works like a Chinese finger trap. It's, you know, a braided material, braided plastic. Don't know if you guys can really tell, but you know, when you push it together, it expands, maybe, possibly, well, there, right? It expands and stuff, and you know, you can get this in all kinds of different sizes. So that's what we're going to be using for this. And at the ends of this, to secure it, I'll be using, you know, inch and a half long piece of heat shrink. So that way, if I do want to add wires to this bundle, it's easy to do. I just have to cut the heat shrink off of the ends, you know, and then this will accept another wire or two if I want to in the future. It looks a heck of a lot better than the, you know, what do you call it, like the wire loom, like that split wire loom. Same price basically. I would say not much harder to, you know, run it through here. There's a couple tricks to it and stuff that I'll show you guys to get it through here. You know, overall it looks way better and it protects the wiring a lot better in my opinion. So what we're going to start on now, the is part of that, and that is we're going to start putting on the you know, the wire loom and stuff, or you know, some kind of a protective coating on this for, you know, chafing and stuff like that. So when you do that, you basically want to shingle everything, right? So if you have a branch, you know, right, it's like, let's just talk about these two right here. Okay, so if you do this one first, this main branch first, and then you try to do this one, and then you try to do this one, what's going to happen is you're going to have like this funky like gap in, you know, shielding. So the way that I do it is basically you really need to like look at the harness and kind of come up with a plan for the whole thing so you can see where you're going to start. For this one, I'm going to start at these ends first. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of shielding, right, or like a little bit of the I guess, yeah, shielding. Okay, and then I'll do like the two branches coming into a main trunk. Then the main trunk will go, so I have like, you know, the shielding coming on both of them, right? Imagine it that way. And then this main bit will go over those, and the heat shrink will go over those two ends, and then you'll heat shrink that. Does that kind of make sense? That way it encapsulates all of it together. And then, you know, it'll go from there, right? So that's why I kind of always start from the ends and work my way into the middle-ish. Kind of depends on the, really depends on the harness. That's why you really need to like look at it and think about the layout of it and stuff like that. That's also part of why on the other end of this thing, I'm putting a connector on there. I would love to not put a connector on there. The pros to putting a connector on there, though, is that it will make it possible for me to do shielding on the whole thing without having to do some seriously fancy stuff that is well above my pay grade. So the other cool thing about putting a connector on it is you can unplug it midway through the system, and if something shorts out or something like that happens, right, you can break the system apart in the middle and do like a continuity test, and you can see, is it on this half of the system there's a problem, or is it on this half of the system there's a problem? And it basically just helps you kind of cut down on, figuring out where the problem is coming from. Just makes it a little bit easier. So, all right. So full disclosure, I had to disassemble the harness. Reason being, I could not get these connectors off. These are for the autometer gauges. They're both Delphi connectors. So part of the reason why I use Deutsch connectors is because I can easily take them apart. When you do that, you can easily just, bundle all your wires together and stick them through your sleeve. These, I tried to take them apart, and I was worried because I'm guessing there's a special tool for it, which I don't have. So I ended up just disassembling the harness into these two connectors are the farthest, I guess these wires are the longest part of the whole harness. So what I did is I put it back in there, and I put a zip tie where, a zip tie and then some red paint pen of, the section basically that I need to loom essentially. So when you're using this loom and heat shrink, you can use electrical tape just to hold everything together, but you need to have some of this high temp tape. I forget the name of it exactly. Again, I'll put a link in the description below. But you need to have this because regular electrical tape, like the nice 3M stuff, it'll just melt before the heat shrink like fully, melts and cures. This stuff will not. So what I'm going to do is basically where my zip ties are on here, I'm going to, put this on there, and then that way it'll stay together. Then I can start at the end. I can slide my, sleeve and heat shrink all the way up here to this point. Like I said, normally this isn't a problem because I can just take the connectors off super easily with the Deutsch connectors. You can take them on and off 15, 20 times, 100 times, doesn't matter. They're easy to get on and off. Not so much with these. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put some tape here where the zip ties are, and after that we'll slide everything in place, heat it up. So gonna do a couple wraps with this stuff, and where are my scissors? Skizzers. Get this stuff on here nice and tight. Okay. So now I'm going to cut my little bit of loom here, sleeving, cut this to the proper length, and then we will slide the stuff over it. Dikes work better to cut that's for sure. Alright, grab some heat shrink. And we're gonna put all this stuff on here. So I cut it like 1 inch or so long. That way, if the end of it gets all like blown out, I have a little bit extra I can trim off of there. So now the end of it is a little bit frayed, so I'm just gonna clean that up, put our heat shrink over it, and we'll heat shrink it. Pull that down. So now I'm gonna kind of pull this stuff down just to kind of snug it up a little bit around the wires. Then heat it up. Alright, and there you have it. Now, see, and I got my both pigtails ready to be plugged in. So nice and snug. So now I'm gonna go put this back in the car and basically run it where I need to, and then I'm gonna get the next branch that's gonna come off of this and keep working it that way. Again, all this stems from can't take these stupid things apart. I did think about cutting them off and splicing them on later, but I didn't really like the idea of that, and like I said, I have the time, so I'm gonna let the camera charge up for a while, and I'll be back. Alright guys, fortunately, camera died, and this took way longer than it should have, because like I said, couldn't take those connectors off. But this is what you end up with. So normally what I like to do is take this little bit of heat shrink right here and scooch it all the way up here onto the back of the connector, but because of where this is going to go, I'm going to end up having to almost kink the connector like that a little bit. So I decided to leave it off because once this stuff dries, as you can see, it's pretty hard to bend. So but overall, pretty happy with it. Now on these wires, I need to put some spade connectors, and then same thing on this wire, because these are going to be going to fuse blocks and relay and blah blah blah. So let's get this bad boy installed in the Can-Am, and then we'll get on to the next thing.